Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Agricultural meteorologist Greg Soulje is here with us today on this Friday. Welcome, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Nice to be with you on a very much almost mid-March day across a good chunk of the country, the Corn Belt and Heartland in particular. Yeah, anything but wintertime for now. I think we'll get into that later on. Matter of fact, we'll be able to adjust and update the winter outlook, the spring outlook, and all that going forward here when we get together next Wednesday for our full half-hour live stream. And otherwise, we'll have an updated look on this weekend agribusiness and update you here accordingly as well.
And we're going to talk a little bit today about South America and down that way. They're having a little too wet, a little too dry, lots going on down there. So we want to talk about what
either side of the pendulum. Yeah. So we'll take a look at how that's impacting first run crops and harvest and trying to get to the second crop in, particularly as it applies to Brazil. But in any event, on to Friday, we go here on the 13th on ahead of a Valentine's weekend, President's Day weekend as well for some who have the holiday on Monday off. But in the meantime, there's the infrared satellite picture from this morning in the brighter clouds or the colder clouds, and they signify the precip. And you can see something moving through the southwestern reaches of the country. Good news there. And into the Pacific Northwest. While it's really probably too late to matter, there's only maybe about 6 weeks left in the wet weather season, stormy weather season in California, the Pacific West. It is at least something out there where a lot of the snow totals off the Cascades and Sierra, 30, 40, maybe 50% of normal equivalency. Water would be about 10 inches, and that's not anything that you really need. That'll get you early on into the first spell of heat across the west and southwest. So some growing concern out there. There are the isobars and high pressure over the eastern Corn Belt locales, a bit of a south wind over the western reaches and into the Mississippi Valley, and nothing but milder air, and the snow cover, which is winding down on at least the visible picture that we have here in the office going. It extends from maybe just east of Bismarck down to maybe just about the northeastern quarter of Illinois, and from there through northern Indiana and Ohio. So much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt still ensconced in cloud cover. And there is the upper air pattern. You can see the buckling U-shaped configuration, upper air systems making their way through the west and particularly the southwestern reaches of the country. Front side and the downstream, as we say, flow is ridging up aloft, and that center of ridging is over Texas and the Gulf Coast, where we'll be looking at some 80 and 85 degree weather, helping to fuel maybe some stronger and severe storms over parts of the deep south and southeastern states over the next couple of days. And we'll get a couple of transports of moisture rain up across northern reaches, at least into the Corn Belt locales, where dryness and drought continues to be the big story. And they'd rather get it now versus later with regard to rainfall in some of these dry drought areas, especially central Illinois and in northwest Ohio. There is the weather maps and charts for this morning. High pressure over the eastern Corn Belt, a couple of systems across the west and southwest, and a very quiet, lackadaisical, so for even mid-winter and mid-February, set of weather maps and charts across the middle part of the country, where, at least across the Corn Belt, cold air is moving on out, and temperatures this afternoon will be up around 60 as far north as parts of Nebraska and Missouri. There may be some 60-degree readings as far north as Springfield, Champaign, Indianapolis, and 50 to 55 as far north as maybe Des Moines, Rockford, Chicago, Detroit. At some point into next week, depending on cloud cover and sunshine. Those temperatures are record and near record setting, especially as they apply to the central and southern Corn Belt, central and southern plains, and are more typical of maybe a mid to late stretch in March versus the mid to late stretch here in through February. And the snow cover, as we talked about, is winding down over northern and eastern Corn Belt locales. Hopefully some of that moisture getting percolated into some of these drier soils, and probably not much of a thaw-freeze cycle going on whatsoever. So a little muddy out there. But at least it's moisture going into the ground of some capacity, and there is more coming. Look at 80-degree readings, and they may push close to 90 maybe in some parts of southern Texas. Those same areas that were subject to frost and freeze into the north end of the Texas citrus crops, they'll be up around 90 going forward into next week. Snow cover remains really limited to parts of North Dakota. That is it. And despite that, winter wheat is still overwintering relatively well across the Corn Belt locales, especially where we haven't had any protective snow cover, the central plains, and where dryness and drought is expanding and increasing, Oklahoma and Texas. And we'll take a look at that drought monitor in just a minute. Speaking of high temperatures, pushing close to 60, as mentioned, up towards the Corn Palace this afternoon. That's 40s and 50s over the eastern Corn Belt areas, the last of the cold air through the eastern states. And going forward, nothing but warm to mild days expected. Again, up to Texas regions of the country where there's a little bit of early season planning over southern sections. That's getting underway. They'll be up at 80 to 85, but it's another corridor that has what we call the D2 or D3 category of severe to extreme drought going on there. So that drought area has increased over the southern plains, some of those livestock areas, despite a couple of spells of winter storminess. Same as they apply to the Corn Belt. Really the only other areas of the country in relatively good shape, parts of the western Corn Belt, central plains, and points north from there. And there's also some drought-related issues going on over the lower Mississippi Valley, the mid-south and southeastern portions of the country, but there's a 1 to 3 inch rain event coming through there, initially starting in Oklahoma and Texas early on into the weekend. Pretty quiet weather setup, all things compared. In comparison, no major storms for now, but we did get some moisture across California. It's in the Four Corners right now, the Great Basin, and a little shower activity in the Pacific Northwest. This system did bring rain and snow to California, but earlier in the week, the rainfall and moisture totals, water equivalency were well under 1 inch. So not much to speak of there. And there's a parade of systems moving through, but none of them look terribly impressive going forward here over the next couple of weeks as the wet weather season winds down across California. There's the Monday afternoon perspective, largely centered in the Four Corners part of the country. A little shower activity, maybe a thunderstorm breaking out into the Red River Valley of the South. Overnight tonight, those showers pick up West Texas, Cotton, Dalhart, Amarillo, back into New Mexico. High snow levels again above about 6,000 or 7,000 feet across the central and southern Rockies. A little snow shower and flurry activity across New York State, and Pacific Northwest gets some shower activity, which will be on the increase there. Northern Rockies, that's probably the best area of the country regarding snowpack and snow cover, but it's not really associated with any big ag area except for parts of Montana. You really look at the Cascades, the Sierra, the mountains of the Southwest for runoff and irrigation supplies going forward. But going forward tomorrow, look at the rain as far north as almost Lincoln, Nebraska, Garden City, Goodland, down to Dallas-Fort Worth, and points east across Missouri. And there's a dry area too over the far southwestern reaches of the Corn Belt. That red hatched area through eastern Texas, Bayou Country, the Arklatex, maybe some stronger and severe storms down there. Storm Prediction Center is coming out with some new categories, evidently, is from what I've heard. May join in one of these little live streams that they have with the National Weather Service out of Lincoln just to see what they're talking about. I'm not sure really why they're changing it, but they are. In any event, rain into the central and southern areas of Illinois, Missouri, southwest Indiana, and points on southward. Probably the northern extent of that will be about a 1/4 inch of rains to Quincy, maybe north of Champaign and heading towards maybe West Lafayette. You can see the bulk of the rain through the Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley, southeastern states. So that's a welcome rain right before they start getting ramped up on field work down there. Won't end the drought, but it's a significant improvement. And that's a pretty generalized 1 to 3 isolated pockets of close to 1 to 2 inches, I should say, pockets of close to 3 inches in the Tennessee Valley and southeastern part of the country. New rains break out across coastal sections of California. And the precipitation chart here is an older one. My apologies for that. We'll have the 7-day precip chart coming up here shortly. Now, on to Argentina and Brazil. Lots to talk about going down there. When we started opening up the camp and talk about the Brazilian weather and Argentine weather, it was pretty much no headlines going on, but maybe to the market's benefit in the domestic scenario, we've got some problems. We still have the ongoing dry areas across central and southern sections of Argentina. They've been varying amounts of rainfall there across northern reaches, some southern reaches. It remains a highly variable setup over northern areas. A lot of those regions of central and southern Argentina still and continue to be in moisture stress. They did get some shower activity around Santa Fe and Buenos Aires. Nothing to write home about, under a 1/4 inch there. So you have uneven distribution of rains. There are deficits continuing through central, especially southern areas, Buenos Aires, for example, around the Cordoba area. So problems continue on across Argentina with the lack of anything super organized. And probably, again, it's a winding down of La Nina. They get impacted by that particular scenario as well. And temperatures haven't been all that fantastic. Formosa still topping out around 100. Many locales that have been looking at readings in the mid and upper 90s. That's a little stressful, especially when you're lacking soil moisture. So the story here as of early February from the government officials, corn has ranged from fair to good, hearing pockets from some of our local sources, and it's even going to move into maybe increase the poor category going forward, where some of those early planted fields are going through a flowering or grain fill stage at the current time. Second crop areas are getting troublesome because of the lack of organized rains. Soybeans continue to be under stress as well. So maybe the markets have built the knowledge into this from earlier on in the season that things are basically worsening in Argentina. Now, on to Brazil. It's the story of haves versus have-nots. Where we've had it, it's getting to be too much of a good thing. And where we haven't had it, well, that continues to be the story. That continues to be the story over northeastern through south central and southern Brazil, as in the lack of organized rainfall. Basically scarce, as we mentioned in some of those areas, and anywhere between a tenth to an inch of rain. It's the usual summertime range that we get here in the mid-latitudes across the U.S. Temperatures basically in the low to mid-90s on target for the time of year. So any significant rain, some pockets of maybe some mid to upper 90s, and higher elevation is going to be increasing stress in those same dry, drought-ridden areas. But at the same time, there's some north and northwestern areas that have remained too wet. Safrina, I believe Safrina is like a second largest state or third largest state with regard to corn planting. That area has been wet. And so some talk about maybe a delayed second crop, and you need to get that in by the third week of February. And by now it should be 15% of the second crop planted by the third week, somewhere between 20 and 25%. Don't think they're going to make those numbers. So while there was a lot of ramping up and talk about the second crop being a blowout yield, different story maybe materializing there. Again, too dry, too wet, no balance really across the area. Soybeans going into a flowering stage right now, along with the water stress and the hot temperatures. And as of the 5th and through Rio Grande do Sul corn harvest, about a third complete. Wide range of numbers coming in there because of the irregular and variable rain amounts. Soybeans are flowering in the Rio Grande do Sul rainfill stage uneven across that state as well. So where you got good soil moisture, yeah, good yields. Where it hasn't been so good and more stress coming along, not so good. So we've gone into this incredible widening range of issues across Argentina and Brazil. So getting busier down there when it was pretty much a couple of 2 or 3 weeks ago, looking to be pretty much cut and dry. The drought monitor says it right there in Nebraska Panhandle country, Illinois, Indiana, Northwest Ohio, expanding from the Missouri Boot Hill down into Oklahoma City, worsening through central and south Texas and the southeastern states. So that southern rain system, and another one that'll probably have some stronger storms next week as well, should at least put a crimp and a dent in the dryness and drought. And it's next week's weather system that will bring some promising rainfall. Hopefully we'll soften the grounds up by then in parts of eastern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. They continue in that D2, D3 category. The snow cover back in the 9th of January looked like this. The snow cover this morning, we've kind of flipped it the other way, where the south and western edges continue to melt away, and they will continue to do so. Although we're not done with winter, livestock people, heads up across Montana, the Dakotas, and upper Midwest. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. There's the upper charts going forward. Monday to Friday, the trough in the west. That H is a summertime air mass. If you were lucky enough to go down into the Florida Keys or into Mexico or central and south Florida away from the coastline, 80s will be pretty common down there. But you can see systems dropping in out of the eastern Atlantic across the four corners. They make the turn to the north and northeast. And this is a pretty favorable setup to let cold air sag south along the divide. That warm ridge moves up across the western Atlantic. Southwesterly winds up aloft. That usually is a pretty busier weather pattern, and each wave brings down slightly colder air each time. So we're not done with moisture or snow going forward from the northern and central plains to the northern and western Corn Belt through the second half of the month of February for openers. Then absent charts Monday to Friday next week. You can see a system winding its way Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday out of the plains of the western Corn Belt. That is a slug of cold air, Arctic air, modified through the Canadian prairie, southern Canadian prairie, across North Dakota, Minnesota, the Upper Lakes region from the Sioux to Bismarck, maybe back down to north and west of the Black Hills, or maybe a significant snow system and a real significant drop-off in temperatures there. We'll take a look at those in just a minute, so be ready, livestock operations. There's a 7-day moisture outlook. Good news for California, good news for the central and southeastern plains, southern Corn Belt, and that's going to be probably a rain and snow event later on into next week across the Upper Lakes region into the St. Lawrence River Valley. So except for Nebraska, some welcome moisture and you want to get it in the ground. So I keep telling people on the radio down there in central Illinois and Indiana, get it in the ground if we can soften it up now and not have to worry about snow melt and rain come the early springtime season. So you might as well make some drought improvement now while the rain gauges are good. So going Friday, rain into Friday and into the weekend, rain over the four quarters into the southern plains, 1 to 2 inches for the southern plains, into the southeastern states, probably some pockets 3 inches and more snow and rain back into California later on into the weekend. And there, the Sierra Ranges and coastal ranges of Northern California, the Pacific Northwest, 2 to 6 inches water equivalency, but that's going to be, again, a fairly high snow level. So not a lot of that's going to be snow. A fair amount will be rain. So you got to keep an eye on debris potential running down and not much snowpack going into the mountains. And that's the weather system that will unfold. A potential winter storm for the north parts of the northern plains, upper Midwest at some point mid to late next week. Showers and thunderstorms south from there, maybe a couple of storms as well into parts of the Corn Belt. High temps between Monday into the 60s and 70s, 50s over the Great Lakes region. You see the cold air up to the north beginning to build in the middle part of next week. And there it is by Friday. Teens and 20s over the Dakotas down to the Great Lakes region, banging up against 60s and 70s. And that usually strengthens the jet stream pattern. The winds aloft. And that's how we get these systems with snow on one side and rain the other to make their way through the plains and Corn Belt locales. Overnight readings, pretty balmy, not even thaw-free cycles with 40s and 50s over parts of the Corn Belt down through Dixie. But you can see cold air through the northern plains along the divide by Wednesday next week. And it begins to settle southward. And a pretty substantial drop off in temperature readings over the northern and central plains, northern Corn Belt locales come Friday. Again, not done with winter time. There's the southwest flow aloft, trough in the southwest, ridging over the southeastern part of the country. There's warming trying to build into Alaska. So anytime you see that, you got to put the cold air somewhere. We think it'll be along either side of the Canadian Rockies, the divide, and slowly with time build it southward over the western half of the country. There's the outlook for temperatures. Get out and enjoy. Why not? With well above average readings over the eastern 2/3 of the country, and the storm track looking to be especially busy through California, the western states, and that's likely to be snow for the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, and sections of the Great Lakes region. Next live stream next Wednesday, 18th, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll talk about the long-range forecast, what's left of wintertime, the spring outlook, and tweak things for summertime right here on this very, what do we call these things still? We ever figure that out? Is it a podcast, a broadcast?
I don't know. You can call them whatever you want. A live stream, a video podcast, or a webinar. I don't know.
Or that guy again.
We call it a great source for weather information. That's what
there
we
you
call
go.
It,
authentic, I think, is the phrase. The
authentic.
Word
I like that word too.
At the very beginning, and you can see that's obviously the case behind me. So that's it for the weather office here.
Very good. So enjoy the mild temperatures. If you're in that 2/3 of the country, you're going to get those here in the next few days. And as Greg says, winter's not over yet, but any kind of little break we can get is always much appreciated.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Greg, and thank you all for tuning in as well.